Why had the radio gone silent just when they needed it most? The question hung in the storm like a cruel joke, unanswered, smothered by static and rain. Pressed the handset to his ear, but nothing came back except the hiss of weather chewing through frequencies. He lowered it slowly, water dripping from his glove, and for the first time since the ambush, he allowed himself to look at his men. Their faces were mud-streaked, hollowed out by exhaustion, eyes darting from jungle shadows to the empty horizon where rescue should have been. They weren't rookies. These were men who had bled through firefights, clawed their way through ambushes, carried their wounded when strength should have failed. But tonight, under this rain in this valley, it wasn't the enemy breaking them. It was silence. The airfield ahead looked nothing like a lifeline. It was a drowned scar carved out of the jungle, waterlogged and shapeless. Floodwater spread across it like black glass, swallowing lights, markers, even the memory of tarmac. Frogs croaked from the edges, as if mocking the men who had fought to get here. Jackson slumped down onto a sandbag, his rifle laid across his knees, hand trembling not from fear but fatigue. "That's it," he muttered. "We're done. Strip's gone. Even if someone wanted to get us out, they couldn't." Wanted to snap at him, but the words caught in his throat. Jackson wasn't wrong. A runway underwater wasn't a runway. It was a graveyard waiting to claim steel and flesh alike. Spat rainwater, his voice sharp. Command said hold position, but positions don't hold when the jungle decides to eat them. We stay here, we drown or die slow. They all knew it. The fight through the jungle had taken its toll. One man lost to shrapnel, another to infection they couldn't treat. Every step since then had been survival by inches, not strategy. They had clung to one promise, that extraction would be waiting. But promises don't shine through 36 hours of tropical storm. Promises don't land on water. Then, without warning, the radio hissed alive. The men froze, static, then a voice so calm it seemed unreal against the chaos. A woman's voice, firm, certain. "Viper 6, this is inbound. ETA 20 minutes. Clear me 20 meters of water at the north end. I'll take it from there." The men looked at each other, disbelief etched into their faces. Grabbed the handset. "Negative, field is underwater. Repeat, underwater, no go." Silence followed. For a heartbeat, it seemed the storm itself had swallowed the stranger's words. Then she returned, her tone like a scalpel cutting through doubt. "I said clear me 20 meters. The rest I'll handle." Shook his head violently. "She'll cartwheel that bird into the jungle. No way a puts down here, not in this weather, not on a strip that's half a swamp." But the voice returned steady. "I've put her down and worse. You want out, make me a window, 19 minutes. It was madness. A C-130 was a beast, a flying fortress. Even in daylight on dry concrete, it took everything to bring one down safe. But something in her tone, unshaken, unflinching, hit them harder than logic. Barked before he could think. "Move, sandbags, logs, whatever you've got, clear the north end. Jackson, lights, orange only, 30 feet apart. Go." For a moment, no one moved. Then they did. Men who had been too tired to raise rifles suddenly hauled sandbags, ripped out logs, clawed mud with bare hands. The hopelessness that had frozen them cracked. Whether it was belief or desperation, it didn't matter. It was movement. The storm mocked their effort. Rain hammered trenches into nothing, mud sucked at their boots, logs floated back into the strip as fast as they dragged them out. But they kept moving, driven not by certainty, but by the idea that someone, anyone, still believed they were worth saving. Above them, unseen in the storm, Captain Ward adjusted her harness in the cockpit of the Hercules. Her hands moved across controls by muscle memory. Hydraulic pressure steady, fuel balanced, flaps armed. Her co-pilot shot her a glance. "Ma'am, we're really doing this." She didn't answer right away. The storm clawed at the windshield like tracer fire in reverse, each raindrop striking hard enough to blur the world outside. She thought back to what her old instructor once told her. Landing in daylight with beacons on concrete proves nothing. Any bus driver can do that. The mark of a pilot is what you do when the lights are gone, when the runway's gone, when physics tells you to stop. Do you stop, or do you fly? Her grip tightened on the yoke. Tonight, she would answer that question again. The seals below clawed at the strip, hands raw, shoulders burning. His voice cracked from shouting orders over the storm. Clear that debris. Jackson, keep those lights steady, orange only. If she can't see them, we're done before she touches down. Sir, this is suicide, Jackson shouted back. Then we die working. Snap, though in his chest, fear gnawed hard. The radio crackled again, her voice precise, cutting. Viper 6 Overwatch 6 minutes out, get me surface contrast, I don't need dry, I need visible. Lady, shouted into the mic, you're about to turn a $2 million aircraft into an aluminum canoe. Abort. Negative. Her tone was final, not cruel, not kind, just truth. I've seen worse. Don't give me opinions, give me lights. That tone, the kind that didn't beg, didn't argue, didn't doubt, silenced the men more than rank ever had. Even Jackson, who had cursed every step through the jungle, went back to planting glow sticks without another word. In the cockpit felt the Hercules groan under her. Not a landing, no, this would be a knife fight against gravity. She didn't need belief from the men below. She needed them to move. She needed them to trust for just long enough. The valley vibrated as her engines pushed through storm-thickened air. Every drop of rain against the glass sounded like shrapnel. Every gust shoved the aircraft sideways. She trimmed, steadied, nudged. There was alive beneath her hands, straining but listening. On the ground, the men clawed at futility. Lightning lit their faces in fractured flashes, mud-smeared, desperate, fighting nature itself. Tiny figures against a storm that had already decided their fate, yet they fought anyway. Then faint at first it came, a sound too deep, too heavy to be thunder, rolling, grinding, alive. The Hercules. The jungle itself seemed to pause, treetops bending under the weight of engines still unseen. The men froze, then looked up into the storm, wide-eyed. Whispered, God help us. Roared over him, his voice raw. Line that edge, get the light steady. If she can't see it, she can't save us. Orange glow sticks sputtered in the rain, scattered like dying embers. To anyone else it looked like chaos. To her it was enough. Visual acquired, said into the mic, eyes narrowing. Her voice was still calm, still steady. She throttled back. Airspeed bled away, dangerously close to stall. Lightning cut across her vision, but her hands didn't waver. Viper 6, she said, as if they had all the time in the world. When I flare, light everything you've got. Flares, strobes, tracer fire, I don't care. Give me a horizon. Give me an end point. Swallowed hard, copy. The Hercules dropped lower, so low the treetops bent in its wake, so low the storm seemed to hold its breath. No one spoke, not on the ground, not in the sky. The jungle had fallen silent too, as if waiting to see whether the laws of nature would bend or break. How much trust can you place in a voice you've never seen? The question cut through his mind as he stared into the black sky, waiting for a shape to appear. He had no face for the woman behind the radio, no name, just a tone, calm, precise, commanding in a way that made men move against reason. The jungle thundered with the roar of engines now. The Hercules was close, too close. The sound was heavier than any helicopter, deeper than any jet. It was the sound of mass, of inevitability, of something too large to belong to this strip of drowned earth. Jackson squinted through the rain, his hand trembling as he jammed another glow stick into the mud. That's not hope in the sky, he muttered. That's a coffin with wings. Spat again, shaking his head. Tell that to the lady with the death wish. Wanted to shut them up, but words felt useless against what was coming. So he barked orders instead, raw and furious. Steady those lights, keep them burning, give her something to see. The rain pounded harder, each drop a hammer blow. The storm had become a personality, mocking, taunting, daring them to believe in miracles. Water clawed at their boots, pulling them into the earth, as if the jungle wanted to claim them before the aircraft ever touched down. Above adjusted the yoke, her breathing steady. She had felt fear before, everyone had, but this wasn't fear. This was clarity. Storms, war zones, broken strips, these were the places where she lived. They stripped away the clutter of procedure, the bureaucracy of permission. Here, in the razor-thin gap between disaster and survival, only skill mattered, only resolve. Her co-pilot's voice cracked. "Ma'am, altimeter says 500. We're too high, too fast. Crosswinds are chewing us alive." She didn't take her eyes off the black ahead. "Hold her steady, trim left." The man hesitated. "This isn't a landing zone. This is suicide." His jaw tightened. She spoke without raising her voice, but the steel in it froze him. This bird doesn't care what's under her. She only cares who's at the stick. The silence after that line was total. Even the crew chief in the back stopped his nervous chatter. They all knew what she meant. Machines didn't make choices. People did. And tonight, she was choosing not to stop. On the ground, the SEALs clawed at debris with frantic hands. Broken timbers, splintered fencing, uprooted trees. Anything that could rip through landing gear had to be gone, even if they knew deep down there was no way to clear it all. "Sir, half these lights are already underwater," Jackson shouted. "Then plant more. Plant anything that glows. She needs contrast," roared back, though the words cut his throat raw. For a moment, lightning split the sky wide open. And in that flash, just a heartbeat, they saw it. The Hercules, a dark behemoth against the clouds, its wings slicing rain like knives. Swore under his breath, "She's actually bringing that monster down." The radio crackled, her voice calm as if the storm didn't exist. "2 minutes out. When I call flare, give me everything. Don't hesitate." Her certainty was worse than doubt, because it forced them to believe, even against themselves. Gripped the handset, rain dripping down his face. "Copy." Inside the cockpit, his hands moved in ritual. Flaps down, throttle steady, nose trim nudged. She didn't glance at the gauges anymore, her body already knew what they said. She scanned the black void ahead, searching not for a runway, but for the faintest flicker of man's defiance against storm. Then she saw it, tiny, scattered, fragile, orange glow sticks flickering like dying fireflies across the waterlogged strip. To anyone else it was chaos. To her it was a line, enough of a line. "Visual acquired," she whispered, more to herself than to anyone else. The Hercules shuddered under her as the storm shoved it sideways. Warnings blinked red across the panel. Stall indicators teased the edge. Her co-pilot's breath hitched, but her hands didn't falter. "Gear down," she ordered. The hydraulics whined, heavy metal grinding against storm pressure as the landing gear lowered into the rain. The aircraft groaned like it knew this wasn't landing. It was survival by violence. On the ground, the men froze as they heard the gears locking in the sky. It was real now. It wasn't theory. It wasn't words on a radio. A C-130 was descending into their valley of mud and storm. "Get ready," shouted, though his own voice cracked with something dangerously close to awe. "When she flares, light it all." The Hercules roared lower, treetops whipping sideways under its wake. Its shadow loomed across the flooded strip, broken only by flashes of lightning. Gritted his teeth. "This is insanity." Jackson clenched his rifle like a talisman. "This is salvation, or it's nothing." In the cockpit, leaned forward, her eyes burning into the void. Every raindrop streaking across the windshield looked like tracer fire. The strip ahead shimmered with water, broken reflections dancing in fragments. No depth, no certainty, just chaos. But she remembered training. Nights when instructors killed the lights, cut the nav, and left cadets blind. They had called it punishment. She had called it freedom. Where others sweated and cursed, she had thrived. Because in the dark, instinct ruled. Her voice was calm, measured. "Cut thrust, hold her steady." The co-pilot's hand shook, but he obeyed. The descent steepened. Air screamed against the fuselage. Altimeter numbers tumbled, 400 feet, 300. The radio crackled. His voice shouted up through static, "We're ready." Didn't answer. She had no words left for them. She had only this. "Brace," she whispered. The Hercules screamed against gravity, its wheels inches from black water. The men on the ground saw nothing but shadow, then, sudden, its massive body cutting through storm, low, impossibly low. Barked now, light it, light everything. Orange lights flared. Makeshift torches hissed in the rain. Even tracer fire snapped into the sky, carving streaks of red against the storm. For one impossible moment, the drowned strip had edges. For one impossible moment, there was a horizon. Pulled, the nose rose, engines bellowed. The Hercules skimmed the flood like a stone across water, spray exploding into the night. For a heartbeat, it seemed she'd lost it. The beast would lift, cartwheel, die. Then the landing gear bit. Mud, rock, water, a sickening lurch. The aircraft bounced, slammed again, thundered forward. Inside, soldiers screamed prayers, curses, anything. Crates rattled. Bodies jolted against harnesses. But the Hercules held. Its bulk plowed through the swamp, engines roaring defiance. Water clawed at its belly, mud dragged at its wheels, but momentum dragged it forward. Seconds stretched into eternities, then stillness. The C-130 groaned into idle, water lapping at its wheels, its frame heavy but upright. For a long moment no one moved, no one breathed. Then the cargo ramp yawned open, spilling harsh floodlights into the storm, and there she was, silhouetted against light and rain, Captain Ward. The men stared, wide-eyed, their disbelief collapsing into something, relief, awe, gratitude so sharp it felt like pain. Whispered, "Impossible." Swallowed hard. He wanted to ask her how. He wanted to demand what kind of person flew steel into a lake, but when his eyes met hers, the words died. Because there was no answer, only the fact that she had. And sometimes, survival didn't need explanation, only witness. What do you say to someone who's just the impossible? The thought burned through his mind as he stared up at her, this woman silhouetted in the floodlight glow, rain streaming down her jacket, face unreadable. She hadn't spoken since the wheels stopped turning. She hadn't needed to. The men shuffled toward the aircraft like survivors crawling from wreckage. Some laughed, broken laughter that cracked under exhaustion. Some wept silently, hands shaking as they touched steel, needing proof it was real. A few simply collapsed to their knees in the water, staring at the beast that shouldn't have been here, alive, upright, waiting. Said nothing. She didn't gesture, didn't bark orders, didn't demand thanks. She simply stood at the ramp, eyes scanning the valley like she was searching for something only she could see. Finally found his voice. "You, how the hell did you?" Her gaze flicked to him, sharp but not unkind. Then she looked past him again, toward the strip, toward the storm that still raged like it hadn't noticed physics had been rewritten. Stepped forward, mud sucking at his boots. He opened his mouth, closed it, tried again. "You shouldn't be here." It wasn't accusation. It was all wrapped in confusion, because no part of him believed command had sent her. He knew the bureaucracy. He knew the risk assessments, the manuals, the chains of permission. No one in 100 lifetimes would green-light what she had just done. Her reply was quiet, almost lost in the storm. "Neither should you." The words cut deep, not cruel, just true. Behind them, the men began to load, lifting their wounded first, dragging them into the bay, strapping them down with trembling hands. Each movement was frantic but reverent, as though touching the aircraft might make it vanish if they weren't careful. Turned, stepping back into the cockpit. She didn't stay to watch their disbelief. She didn't explain. She simply resumed her place, running her hands across instruments, checking, adjusting, already preparing for the next impossible piece. Because landing had only been step one. Followed her into the cockpit, ducking beneath wires and panels dripping condensation. He stood behind her chair, unsure whether he had the right to speak, but the words forced themselves out. "Why?" She didn't look back. Her hands moved with ritual precision across the console. Flap adjustments, throttle, gauges checked. "Why what? You weren't assigned to us. Hell, you weren't even on the roster. Who sent you?" For a moment she didn't answer. Only the storm spoke, rain hammering the fuselage, thunder rolling across the valley. Then softly, "No one." Blinked, "Then why the hell are you here?" Finally she turned. Her eyes were dark, unflinching, but there was weight behind them, something deeper than steel. Because no one else was coming. The words hit harder than any bullet. Stared at her. He wanted to argue, to demand logic, to make sense of the madness. But instead, silence stretched between them, because he knew she was right. Command had abandoned them. Nature had cornered them. And yet, here she was. Looked away first, returning to her instruments. Her voice dropped lower, almost to herself. "Sometimes that's all there is. Not permission, not orders, just a choice. Fly or stop." Didn't press further. He couldn't, because deep down he understood. Every man who carried a rifle into the jungle knew it. Every step forward was a choice no manual could dictate. Some people stopped. Some didn't. Behind them, the bay echoed with the chaos of survivors strapping in. Wounded groaned. Men cursed as they secured crates against the storm's turbulence. Yet beneath it all was something hadn't heard in days. Hope. Fragile, flickering, but alive. Jackson stumbled past with a wounded man slung over his shoulders. He caught eye. "Sir, I don't know who she is, but if she can land that bird on a lake, I'll follow her anywhere." Didn't reply. He only looked back at who hadn't heard, or maybe had but chose not to react. The co-pilot, pale and rattled, finally found his courage to speak. "Ma'am, with all respect, taking off from this." He gestured toward the drowned strip outside. "Landing was bad enough, but lifting a fully loaded Hercules, that's not physics, that's suicide squared." His expression didn't shift. "Then don't think in physics." The co-pilot gaped. "That's—" "Think in seconds," she cut him off. "Think in angles, think in margins so thin they'd make a knife nervous. That's how we get out." Her voice wasn't raised, but it silenced him anyway. Finally exhaled, realizing he'd been holding his breath since stepping inside. He'd seen commanders freeze in firefights. He'd seen men crumble under decisions too heavy for their bones. But her, she carried it differently, like weight was just another part of flying. Still, he couldn't stop the question that burned. "What's your name?" For a moment she didn't answer. Then, only that, no rank, no call sign, just a name. And somehow, that was heavier than any title. Outside, the storm shifted again, rain hammering harder, winds clawing sideways at the fuselage. The aircraft groaned against it, protesting. Time was bleeding away. Stumbled up the ramp, soaked, dragging a crate of ammunition behind him. "We're loaded, sir. Everyone's in." He looked toward, then back at. "Tell me she's not crazy enough to—" "She is," cut him off. Swore under his breath. "Then God help us all." In the cockpit ran one last sweep of the instruments. Everything screamed no. Hydraulics strained. The strip was no strip. The storm was no ally. Logic was a wall closing in. But she had never flown for logic. She glanced at the co-pilot. "Strap in, we leave in 2 minutes." The man hesitated. "Ma'am, you can't just—" "2 minutes," she repeated, eyes locked on the drowned strip outside. The seals strapped down, every buckle a prayer, every glance toward the cockpit a silent plea. Remained standing behind her, his voice low now, almost resigned. "If you pull this off." She didn't let him finish. Her reply was quiet, almost a whisper lost to the storm. "I won't pull it off. We will." And with that, she pushed the throttles forward. The Hercules roared, engines screaming into the night. The flood trembled beneath it. The storm bared its teeth again. Every man on board held his breath. Because survival wasn't guaranteed. It never had been. How do you lift hope from a place designed to bury it? The question wasn't spoken. It didn't need to be. It sat heavy in the fuselage, pressing down on every man strapped to the steel benches, every wounded soldier clinging to consciousness, every creak of the C-130's frame as rain hammered its flanks. Sat forward in her seat, eyes fixed on the storm-soaked strip that wasn't a strip anymore. Just water. Black, bottomless, deceptive. She could hear the doubt in every breath behind her, even though no one dared speak it aloud. The co-pilot fumbled with his harness, his voice trembling. "Ma'am, I'm telling you, getting this thing airborne, with this weight, with no runway, you'll drown her before you even hit V1. Didn't answer. Her hands traced the throttle levers like a pianist warming up before a symphony. Small movements, familiar touches. She didn't look at him, didn't look at still standing behind her, didn't even look at the gauges. She looked only at the storm beyond the glass. Finally she spoke, voice steady, as if the world weren't caving in around them. "Every plane has a limit, and every pilot has a choice. Which one gives first?" The co-pilot stared at her, as though waiting for her to smirk, to break, to admit she was joking. She never did. Behind them, braced against the frame, knuckles white on the back of her chair. "We don't need riddles right now. We need numbers. Tell me this can work." Her jaw tightened. "No, it can't. Not on paper, not in any sim, not in a classroom, but numbers don't fly. People do." The words hung in the air like the hum of the engines. Low, vibrating, undeniable. His voice cracked from the cargo bay. "Sir, storm's pushing water higher. If we don't move soon, we're swimming this bird out instead of flying her." His eyes narrowed. She could feel it too, the storm tightening its grip, the valley floor rising under the weight of rain. If they waited even minutes, the strip would vanish completely. She flicked a switch. Engine whine climbed deeper, hungrier. The Hercules shuddered against its own power, water rippling violently beneath it. Grabbed the back of her seat. "You've got wounded strapped in, men who already bled to get here, if this goes wrong." She cut him off, not by raising her voice but by lowering it. "If this goes wrong, they die. If we stay, they die slower. Which death do you prefer, Commander?" The silence after her words was sharp enough to wound, swallowed hard. He had commanded men through firefights, through ambushes, through loss. But he had never faced a choice so brutal, so naked. He gave a small nod. "Then do it." Didn't need his permission, but she gave him that much. She pressed the intercom, her voice echoing through the bay. Calm, almost surgical. "Strap in. Brace hard. What you feel in the next 5 minutes will try to convince you we won't make it. Ignore it. Don't look for logic, look for fight. That's all we've got." Some men closed their eyes. Others clutched dog tags, whispered prayers, muttered curses. A few stared at her back, as though by sheer will they could absorb the steadiness she carried like armor. Jackson leaned his head against the fuselage, muttering, "If she can land us on a lake, maybe she can fly us out of hell." Shot him a glance, "Or maybe this is where hell wins." "Better to fight it in the sky," Jackson muttered, "than drown in the mud." His hand eased forward on the throttles. The Hercules growled louder, engines clawing against the storm. She checked the instruments once more, knowing each needle lied in some way, each number distorted by weather and water. She trusted her hands more than her gauges. "Release brakes." The co-pilot hesitated, then obeyed. The aircraft lurched forward. Water surged against its wheels, spraying in torrents, as if the storm itself tried to anchor the beast in place. The Hercules groaned, protesting. From the bay, men shouted over the roar, "She's bogging down." The co-pilot snapped, panic creeping in. "We're dragging, too much drag." "Hold it steady," she commanded, voice calm, as though this were just another drill. Her eyes locked forward, unblinking, hands firm on the yoke. The Hercules pushed harder, engines screaming, wheels carving trenches through water and mud. Spray engulfed the windows, blinding the outside world. It was like trying to claw through a river with wings. "Airspeed," she demanded. The co-pilot squinted at the gauge, voice trembling. "Not enough, 40 knots short, we'll never lift at this rate." "Not yet," she said. Her voice dropped low, almost intimate, as though she were speaking to the aircraft itself. "Come on, girl, show me you're more than numbers." The fuselage rattled, crates clanging against tie-downs. Men cursed, knuckles white on harness straps. Braced harder, eyes flicking between the windshield and her face. 50 yards left, the co-pilot shouted, desperation cracking his voice. Jaw set, her hand slammed the throttles full forward. Engines roared into a scream so loud it tore through the storm itself. The Hercules surged, wheels biting deeper, drag giving way to thrust. The co-pilot's voice broke, "V1. Rotate." She pulled. The nose lifted, spray exploded beneath them. For a sickening second, the Hercules surfed the flood, skating like a stone, too heavy to climb, too slow to leave. The co-pilot screamed, "We're stalling." "Not tonight," whispered. The beast shuddered, fought, clawed, then lift. Wheels broke water, spray fell away, the valley dropped beneath them. The men in the bay erupted, shouts, curses, laughter that sounded half insane. Relief surged like oxygen after drowning. But didn't celebrate. She kept her hands steady, knuckles white, because they weren't safe yet, not close. The Hercules clawed upward, engines straining against storm winds that shoved them sideways. Altimeter spun, warning klaxons blared, rain slashed the fuselage like knives. Shouted from the bay, "We're airborne, we're actually." "Sit down," barked, but his own voice shook, caught between fury and awe. The co-pilot gasped, his chest heaving. "Ma'am, we cleared it, but these winds." "Hold course," ordered, steady as stone. The Hercules bucked again, thrown sideways like a toy. Men shouted. Crates rattled, but fought it, every muscle in her arms burning against the yoke, refusing to give the storm what it wanted. Leaned closer, his voice low. "You did it." For the first time since she'd spoken on the radio, she allowed herself the smallest breath of a smile. Not wide, not proud, just tired. "No," she said softly, "we did." And outside, the valley fell away, swallowed by storm. They had escaped the ground, but the sky had its own war waiting. What breaks first, the machine or the person flying it? The question lived in every rattle of the fuselage, as the Hercules clawed through black skis. They had left the drowned strip behind, but the storm hadn't released them. It struck harder up here, punishing them with winds that slammed the wings sideways, rain that felt like shrapnel, turbulence that hurled men against their harnesses. The seals in the cargo bay clung to straps and crates as if faith could be gripped with their hands. His voice broke through the chaos, yelling across the hold. "She got us off the ground, but this bird's coming apart in the air." Jackson, strapped tight, spat back between clenched teeth. "Then better in the air than under 6 feet of water." The fuselage lurched again, a violent drop that sent stomachs into throats. Crates slammed against restraints. A wounded man groaned in agony. Prayers bled into curses. In the cockpit, alarms blinked red. The co-pilot's hands shook over his controls, his voice raw with panic. "We're losing trim. Crosswinds are killing us. Ma'am, we're past tolerance." His eyes never left the windshield, though it showed nothing but rain and lightning. Her hands fought the yoke like it was alive, each adjustment small, surgical, unflinching. "Hold her steady," she ordered. The co-pilot gaped at her. "We can't hold her steady. She's not designed for this." Cut him off, voice low, dangerous. "Neither am I, but here we are." For a moment, even the storm seemed quieter. Stood behind her, bracing himself against the cockpit frame, watching her profile. Her jaw tight, her shoulders rigid, her hands steady even as everything around them screamed chaos. He wanted to ask how she could be so calm. He wanted to believe she was unshakable. But he saw it just for a moment. A flicker. Her left hand trembled slightly when it wasn't gripping the throttle. Not fear, memory. She wasn't untouched by this. She was fighting something inside as much as she was fighting the storm. Lightning slashed across the horizon, searing the valley below into strobe-lit fragments. For half a second, saw it, the ground falling away, jungle drowning in flood, the drowned strip they had left behind. He whispered without meaning to, "How many times have you done this?" Her voice came back steady, enough to know it doesn't get easier. Her eyes flicked toward him for the briefest heartbeat, then forward again. The co-pilot wiped sweat from his temple, his voice cracked. "Ma'am, we're burning too much fuel fighting this headwind. We won't make the next base. We'll have to ditch in the jungle." Shook her head once, "No." "Ma'am, the numbers." "Forget the numbers, we don't ditch." The man stared at her like she was insane, though heard something else in her voice. Not arrogance, not denial, something heavier. She wasn't refusing the numbers. She was refusing the memory. And suddenly wondered, what had she lost before, who hadn't made it last time? The Hercules bucked violently, a downdraft slamming them downward like a hammer blow. Soldiers in the back screamed as their harnesses bit into ribs and shoulders. A crate broke loose, smashing across the floor until two men wrestled it down. The engines howled as forced the nose up, her arms straining against physics itself. "Altitude," she barked. The co-pilot stammered, 1,500 dropping. "Hold." The aircraft trembled like a beast on the edge of collapse. Metal groaned, rivets strained. The storm clawed at them, daring them to fall. Then, inch by inch, the Hercules clawed back upward, shoving against the air like a fist. Braced harder, heart hammering. He couldn't stop staring at her, at the way she moved, not frantic, not reckless, but exact. Every gesture was a fight, and every fight was personal. Finally, he asked the question that had been burning. "Why are you here, really?" She didn't answer. Not at first. The storm filled the silence, punishing them with another sideways shove. The Hercules groaned, metal straining, as though the aircraft itself listened for her reply. His eyes flicked shut for half a second, just half. Then she opened them again, burning into the void. "3 years ago," she said softly, "Kandahar. We tried to put down on a strip cratered by mortars. Too short, too broken, too much fire in the sky." Her voice wavered just once. "We didn't make it, lost half the crew. The rest were mine to carry, except you don't carry ghosts out of a crater, you just remember them." Felt the air in his chest go heavy. His hands tightened on the yoke, the muscles in her arms trembling under strain. "They told me I wasn't fit to fly again. Not officially. Too reckless. Too broken. But broken doesn't stop storms. Broken doesn't save men on the ground, so I kept flying just where no one could see." The co-pilot stared at her wide-eyed. You're not even supposed to be here." She didn't look at him. "I'm here because no one else was." The words hit like a blade. The storm roared louder, but for him, it was her voice that drowned everything else. In the bay, the men clung as another violent roll slammed them sideways, shouted over the chaos, "Is she even human?" Jackson gritted his teeth, gripping his harness. "If she's not, then thank God for whatever she is." The Hercules clawed upward again, higher this time. Lightning slashed above them, illuminating sheets of rain like steel curtains. Every alarm still screamed. Every gauge still lied. But they were alive. His jaw tightened, her eyes locked on the black horizon. She whispered, not to them, not even to herself, but to the storm itself. "Not tonight. You don't get them tonight." Swallowed hard, his throat burning. He had led men through fire, through hell, but he had never seen this. A fight not against soldiers, not against bullets, but against nature itself, against fate itself, fought by one woman's refusal to quit. The storm bucked them again, furious, but the Hercules climbed. It wasn't safe, it wasn't stable, but it was flight. And in that fragile climb between chaos and survival, Every man on board felt it, something heavier than fear, sharper than awe. Hoping. Not blind, not hope forged from defiance. What happens when the storm outside finally quiets, but the storm inside does? The question lingered in the cabin, long after the worst of the turbulence eased. The Hercules leveled, not smoothly, but with the ragged steadiness of a fighter staggering back to its feet. The rain no longer slammed like gunfire. The lightning stretched farther apart, like the sky had spent its rage and was now content to brood. But the men inside didn't relax. They clutched harness straps with white knuckles, breath still shallow, eyes darting between one another as though daring someone else to say it first. We made it. No one spoke, because no one truly believed it yet. In the cockpit, the co-pilot wiped sweat from his face with a trembling hand. His voice was hoarse. "We're through the worst, ma'am," but he tapped the fuel gauge. The needle sagged dangerously low. "We burned too hot fighting that storm. Range is shot. Closest strip we've got clearance for is 400 clicks. We won't make half that." His jaw tightened. She didn't look at the gauge. She already knew. She had felt it in the drag, in the burn, in the way the engines had screamed. Numbers only confirmed what instinct had whispered for miles. They were running out of sky to spend. Leaned forward from behind her chair. His voice was raw, stripped bare. "Options." The co-pilot's laugh was bitter, jagged. "Options? We don't have options. We've got a valley of jungle below and fuel bleeding out like a throat wound." Didn't raise her voice. She simply spoke over him, steady. "We've got 30 minutes of air, maybe 35 if I squeeze her. We find ground by then or we don't." The co-pilot twisted toward her. "Find ground where? There's nothing but forest and river for 100 miles in every direction." Her eyes narrowed at the horizon, where clouds still massed like walls of smoke. "Then we make ground where there isn't any." Frowned. "You mean a drop zone?" Her silence was answer enough. The commander's stomach clenched. Parachutes in this weather, over jungle so thick it could strangle men in vines before they ever hit dirt. It was suicide dressed as chance, but so was everything else tonight. Behind them in the bay, the men stirred uneasily as the Hercules groaned through another pocket of turbulence. Jackson's voice carried forward, tight and sharp. "We're not gonna make it, are we?" Snapped at him. "Shut it. If she got us up, she'll get us down." But Evan's words lacked conviction. They weren't defiance. They were prayer. His voice cut through, calm but edged with steel. She didn't turn around. "You'll make it, that's what matters." Jackson blinked, stunned. "What about you?" Her hands tightened slightly on the yoke. She didn't answer. Saw it, that flicker again, the silence that spoke louder than denial. He leaned closer, his words low so only she could hear. "You're planning to ditch the bird." Her jaw flexed. "Someone gotta keep it steady till the last shoots out." The weight of her meaning hit him like another downdraft. She wasn't planning survival. She was planning sacrifice. "No," the word tore from his throat before he could stop it. "You don't get to decide that, not alone." Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp. "I already decided 3 years ago. Tonight just finishes it." Stared at her, heart pounding, rage and disbelief colliding inside him. He had lost men under his command. He had carried bodies out of firefights, but never had he seen someone embrace death so calmly, like it was just another line item on a checklist. He wanted to shake her, to force her to admit she was human, not some myth carved from rain and fire. But then the Hercules lurched again, dragging his anger back into silence. The co-pilot broke it instead, his voice thin. "Ma'am, even if we try, we don't have enough altitude for a clean drop. By the time they're out, they'll be too low to deploy." Scanned the gauges, her mind carving through numbers, angles, memories. She had trained for blind drops before, but this wasn't training. This was a knife fight with gravity all over again. Her lips pressed tight. "Then we buy them more altitude." "How?" demanded. "We're already bleeding fuel." She looked out at the black horizon. the jungle yawning below like a mouth waiting to swallow, by giving the storm one more fight. The co-pilot paled. You want to climb back into that? His eyes never wavered. It's the only thing taller than us right now. The cockpit fell silent, save for the groan of the engines and the hiss of wind clawing at the fuselage. Even couldn't speak, because deep down he understood. To give them a chance, she'd have to dive back into the teeth of what they'd barely survived. The intercom crackled as voice carried forward rough. "Ma'am, what's the plan? You tell us straight, we deserve that much." Press the button, her voice calm but softer now, almost human. "The plan is simple, you live." No one spoke after that. Minutes bled into one another, each second stretching thin. The Hercules trembled with fatigue, its frame groaning like an old warrior asked to fight one battle too many. The men in the bay clutched their straps, their weapons, each other, anything that felt solid against the uncertainty clawing at them. His mind churned. He hated it. He hated that she had taken their survival onto her shoulders like it was hers alone to bear. He hated the storm for making her believe sacrifice was the only currency left. But most of all, he hated that he couldn't stop her. Finally, his hands tightened on the yoke, her jaw set like stone. "Strap in, we climb." The Hercules screamed as engines throttled higher, dragging the beast back toward the wall of storm they had just escaped. The fuselage rattled. The men shouted, but the nose rose anyway, cutting upward, refusing gravity's grip. In the bay, Jackson squeezed his eyes shut, whispering through clenched teeth, "This is madness." His reply was sharp, almost reverent, "This is survival." His gaze stayed locked on her. Ward, the ghost pilot, the storm whisperer, the woman who didn't ask permission to defy death. He didn't know if she was saving them or burying herself. And in that climb, in the scream of engines and the groan of steel, he realized the truth. Maybe it was both. Many times can you gamble with the sky before it takes everything? The question lived in every heartbeat as the Hercules clawed upward, re-entering the jaws of the storm. Engines screamed in protest, straining against gravity and rain. The fuselage rattled like it was coming apart at the seams. Every rivet, every panel seemed to ask the same thing: why push me farther? Because she had no choice. Ward's hands gripped the yoke, her knuckles pale, her breathing measured. She didn't fight the storm like an enemy. She bent with it, twisted through it, turned its weight against itself. But even she knew she was asking for more than metal was meant to give. The co-pilot clung to his harness, eyes darting across failing instruments. "Ma'am, airspeed bleeding, altitude unstable. We're not gonna hold this climb." Didn't blink. "We only need another 1,000 feet. Another 1,000, his voice cracked. "We don't have the fuel, we don't have the thrust, we don't have." Her voice cut through, sharp as lightning. "We don't have time to argue." Behind them, braced against the cockpit frame, his boots wide in the trembling deck. His eyes never left her face. Her jaw was locked, her focus absolute, but there was something underneath it, a tension deeper than the storm. Not panic, not fear, something heavier. Sacrifice. He knew it now. She was climbing not for them to land, but for them to leave her. In the bay, chaos mirrored the cockpit. The SEALs strapped themselves as the aircraft shook. Wounded men groaned, medics held them down. Gear clanged and shifted despite tie-downs. Every lurch of the Hercules felt like the last. Shouted over the roar, his voice torn raw, "She's trying to kill us." Jackson shook his head violently, eyes squeezed shut. "No, she's trying to save us. You don't climb back into hell unless you've got a reason." Another violent jolt threw men against their harnesses, a crate smashing loose until 3 of them scrambled to lash it again. Sparks hissed from a panel above as rain found a seam. Barked, "Reason or not, this tin won't hold." "Then pray she does," Jackson spat. Lightning exploded across the windshield, blinding white. For an instant, saw her eyes illuminated, burning, unyielding but shadowed by something unspoken. He leaned forward close to her ear, his voice low and sharp. "You mean to stay behind?" She didn't flinch. "If I don't, no one gets out. You're not their mother, you're not their martyr, you're one of us." His words tore out, harsher than he intended. "You don't get to write yourself out of this story." Her jaw clenched. "You don't understand." "Then make me." For the first time since they had met, her voice cracked, not with fear but with memory. "Kandahar, I left men behind that night. I swore I wouldn't again. If that means this bird dies with me in it, then so be it." The cockpit fell silent except for alarms and storm. Even the co-pilot, white-knuckled on his harness, looked away. His throat burned. He had seen grief before. He had seen men carry ghosts heavier than rucksacks. But this wasn't grief. It was guilt sharpened into duty. And he hated it. "Listen to me." His voice dropped to a growl, low, desperate. "We all have ghosts. You don't get to join them, not tonight. You bought us a chance. Don't throw yourself away to prove something they already know." Her eyes flicked toward him, a storm in themselves. For the first time, hesitation cracked her steel, just for a heartbeat. Then the Hercules dropped. A downdraft slammed them like a fist, the nose pitching down violently. Men screamed in the bay as weightlessness ripped them against their harnesses. The co-pilot shouted numbers, panicked. "Altitude falling, airspeed critical, she won't recover." His hands yanked the yoke, muscles straining, every tendon in her arms alight with pain. "Hold!" she roared, not at him, not even at the crew, at the bird itself. The Hercules groaned, shuddered, fought. Its wings flexed, engines screamed, steel creaked. Held his breath, waiting for the sound of tearing metal. Instead, lift. The nose pulled up, the altimeter steadied. The beast clawed back against gravity. The bay erupted in shouts, half terror, half disbelief. Cursed under his breath, clutching the strap across his chest. "She's not flying this bird. She's dragging it by sheer will." Jackson let out a breathless laugh, wild with adrenaline. "Then God bless stubborn will." The climb steadied inch by inch. The storm battered, but the Hercules rose. Altimeter ticked, 700, 900, 1200 feet. His jaw was set, sweat streaking down her temple, eyes locked on the void ahead. She whispered through gritted teeth, "Almost there." Leaned closer, his voice steady but fierce. "If we make this climb, you promise me you don't stay behind. Do you hear me? You promise." Her hands never left the yoke. Her voice came quiet. "I can't promise that." "Then I can't let you do it alone," he shot back. Their eyes locked, storm outside, storm inside, colliding in silence. The co-pilot's voice cut in, trembling. 2,000 feet. Exhaled slowly. Her voice dropped into the calm that had carried them this far. "That's enough. Prepare for drop." His gut twisted. The men in the bay were going to get their chance, but he knew she still hadn't given herself one. The storm roared on, vengeful and alive. The Hercules shuddered, bleeding fuel, every bolt and seam stretched to breaking. And in that fragile space between death and defiance, one truth burned brighter than the lightning outside. They weren't done fighting. Not the storm, not the jungle, not even each other. Because sometimes the hardest battle isn't survival. It's convincing someone they deserve it. What do you owe to the living when the dead still call your name? The question filled the Hercules as it clawed through thinning clouds, engines screaming, fuel bleeding down to fumes. They had altitude now, barely enough for parachutes to bloom, barely enough for hope to exist. The men in the bay tightened their harnesses, checked the chutes strapped to their backs, exchanged glances sharp with fear and wonder. They had already survived more than anyone should. The question now wasn't if they could escape. It was who would stay behind to make it possible. Ward sat in the cockpit, her hands still locked on the yoke, her eyes scanning the darkness ahead. She had guided them here, dragged a steel beast through storm and gravity's jaws. But she hadn't lied. There wasn't enough left for everyone. Something had to give. Knew it, he stood behind her, shoulders square, jaw set. His men strapped in behind him, waiting for his command. But he hadn't given one, because this wasn't just a military decision. This was human, raw. He leaned closer, his voice low, carrying only for her. "You're planning to keep her steady while we jump." His jaw flexed. She didn't answer, she didn't have to. "Don't," said, not barked, not begged, just spoken like a man who had carried loss too long. "Don't write yourself into the grave before the ground even takes you." Her eyes flicked toward him, sharp, searching. "I made this choice long before tonight. This is just where it lands." Shook his head. "You don't get to pay twice. Once in Kandahar, once here. You don't carry every ghost. You don't die for every man." Her grip on the yoke tightened. "Then why am I the one in this seat?" The storm outside had weakened, but the silence inside was worse. The co-pilot's voice cracked, breaking it. "Fuel's redlining. 20 minutes, maybe less, before we're dead stick." Shout carried from the bay. "We're ready to drop, sir." Swallowed hard, he should have said it. Go, jump. That was the order, the duty, the way to save the most lives, but his voice stuck, because behind that order was her sacrifice. Spoke instead, her voice cutting clean. "When I say go, you move. No hesitation." Jackson shouted back, defiance in his tone. "And you, what about you?" She didn't answer. His chest burned. He had led men through firefights, through ambushes, through the jungle itself. But never had he felt rage like this, rage at her calm, her certainty, her refusal to see her own worth. He slammed his hand down on the console, hard enough to rattle switches. "No." The cockpit went still. Even the co-pilot froze. His voice was raw, cracking. "You don't get to leave them that story. That the woman who saved their lives decided hers didn't matter. You don't get to teach them sacrifice means erasing yourself. That's not strength. That's surrender." His eyes cut toward him, cold fire sparking in their depths. "And what if surrender's all I've got left?" Leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper sharp as a blade. "Then borrow my strength until you remember your own." For the first time her eyes broke, just for a heartbeat, a flicker of something fragile beneath the armor. The intercom crackled as voice came again, urgent. "Sir, orders." Didn't look away from her, his jaw clenched. Then he barked, "Stand down, no one jumps." The bay erupted in disbelief. Shouts, curses, fear, but he didn't flinch. His eyes stayed locked on hers. "You got us off the ground, now get us home, not alone, not broken, together." The silence between them felt endless, then slowly exhaled. Her hands loosened just slightly on the yoke, not surrender, not relief, something quieter, a choice remade. Her voice, when it came, was softer. "Then we find ground." The co-pilot blinked at her. "Ground, where? There's nothing but jungle." "There's always ground," she said. Her tone was certain again, but different now. Less burden, more resolve. "You just have to believe it's there before you see it." And then through the thinning storm, it appeared. A break in the jungle canopy. Not an airstrip, not a field, just a stretch of high ground where the flood hadn't swallowed everything. Uneven, short. Suicide for a bird this size. Unless you believed otherwise. His hand steadied on the controls. Her voice filled the intercom, calm and final. "Brace for landing." The bay went silent. Men closed their eyes, some whispered prayers, some clenched fists. All waited. The Hercules dropped lower, engines screaming, wings flexing. The jungle rose to meet them, trees clawing at their flanks. "Gear down," she commanded. Hydraulics groaned. Steel protested. The co-pilot muttered curses under his breath, gripped the back of her chair, heart hammering. The clearing rushed toward them. Too short, too rough, too impossible. But impossibility had never stopped her before. The wheels hit hard, slamming against dirt and rock. The fuselage lurched, bounced, screamed. Crates tore against restraints. Men roared as harnesses cut into them. Fought the yoke like it was alive, every muscle burning, refusing to let the beast roll. "Hold!" she shouted through gritted teeth. The Hercules skidded, dug trenches, snapped saplings, dragged itself through mud and stone. Sparks spat from undercarriage. Metal groaned like it was being torn apart. Then stillness. Silence fell heavy, broken only by the groan of cooling engines. The bay exploded in shouts, laughter, weeping. Men tore at harnesses, stumbling out into the clearing, collapsing onto dirt they never thought they'd see again. Dropped to his knees, laughing like a madman. Jackson wept openly, clutching his rifle like a brother. Stood frozen in the cockpit, staring at her. Ward, hands trembling now as they slipped from the yoke, chest heaving, eyes wet not with fear but release. "You did it," he whispered. She shook her head, her voice breaking at last. "We did." Outside, the storm broke fully. Clouds tore open, revealing a sky but starlit. The jungle glistened, quiet now, humbled. Stepped closer, his voice low. "They'll never forget you." She looked at him, weary, eyes shadowed by every ghost she carried. Then softly, "Then maybe I don't need to forget myself." He nodded. For the first time, he believed she might. The SEALs gathered outside, soaked, battered, alive. They looked back at the Hercules resting in mud and ruin, a monument to defiance. And they looked at her, not as a ghost, not as a myth, but as something harder to define. Not strength, not sacrifice. Resilience. The kind that doesn't ask for applause, the kind that simply acts. And in that clearing, under that sky, the truth lingered. Sometimes dignity doesn't speak. It simply flies.